All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call the meeting to order because we have a few announcements, so we can leave plenty of time. Keep eating. I know you just got your food, so thank you so much for being here. All right, so just a couple of notes. A lot of you have been here, so you know, but we have the note cards on the table. That's where you're going to write your questions for our representatives up here. So if you have questions, write them on the cards and we'll collect those. And there's also volunteer hour sheets. So if you do any sort of volunteering for political campaigns, your precinct chair, delegate, that kind of thing, you can count those hours, as well as non-political service. There's a spot for that. So any sort of church or community service. We'll gather those up. They go towards our club. And we usually get a good reward at the national level because you guys are awesome with your volunteer hours. So keep putting those in each month. And then we also, let's see, what else do we need to make note of? There's a Meet the Candidate event on Tuesday up at Dixie Tech at 5:30. And there'll be a series of candidate booths and forums, little small debate type forums. So if you'd like to check out all the candidates, federal, state, local, they'll all be there Tuesday night. And then I'm going to turn, Jennifer, do you want to come? Jennifer's going to make an announcement, about this beautiful quilt that we have over here.
Okay, so, can you hold it with her? Okay, so this is a gorgeous quilt. So I have a friend in Las Vegas who makes these quilts for the military when they come back through Honor Flight. And that's who our charity is for this year, is Honor Flight for our local charity. And so I had her make this quilt, and we are going to raffle it off. And we're going to be raffling it we're going to be selling raffle tickets. They are $1 a piece or $20 for my arm length. And you will get more than 20. So we've already tested that. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to be selling raffle tickets for the next 3 months. And then in September at our evening meeting, we will then pull a ticket and raffle. And you can then choose whether you want to keep the quilt yourself because you've won it, or if you want to donate it back to Honor Flight so that next time one of the service people come back from Washington, D.C., they can be handed the quilt. It's up to you. But that's my goal. So anyway, so happy raffle tickling.
Thank you so much. This is beautiful. All right. Did I miss any major announcements? Sometimes I do that when I'm up here, so tell me. We also want to recognize our elected officials. We always appreciate your support being there. Obviously, we have our Sunshine Caucus you'll hear from. We have Mayor Billings from Hurricane. We have Councilwoman Janine Burton from Santa Clara. Commissioner Adam Snow, thank you for being here. Did I miss anyone else that came in? Sometimes I sneak in on us. Okay. Well, I'm going to turn the time over to our chaplain Sharon for our prayer. And then we'll turn it to Lori for our Americanism, followed by Joanne for our membership report, and we'll go to that point.
Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, we're thankful to Thee to be together today. We're thankful to Thee for this venue provided us by Santa Clara City, and for the nourishment this food provides, which we receive from Thee through Cafe Zupas. We're grateful to Thee for a successful March meeting with 4 of the candidates for governor. We're thankful to Thee to welcome today our Sunshine Caucus, and grateful to Thee for the work they accomplished this session. We welcome Senator Evan Vickers and Representative Walt Brooks, Joseph Elison, Colin Jack, and Neil Walter. We're happy they're here to inform us about the session. We're thankful to Thee for the Supreme Court, who who are hearing cases and will rule this spring on social media cases as pertains to the First Amendment, suppression of information, mis- and disinformation, and the blocking of private citizens' social media accounts. We're grateful to thee to witness the growing awareness of citizens to our country's many problems, particularly the open border and the economy, and we are encouraged by a shift in attitudes. Father, we ask thy blessing for Cafe Zupas, may they have continued success. We ask thy blessing for our Sunshine Caucus, for although the session is over and work for their constituents continue, may they enjoy being back in Dixie. We ask thy blessing for the Supreme Court. May they act in accordance with the Constitution, and may their decisions reinforce it and strengthen our country. We ask thy blessing for the 6 families who lost a loved one in the tragic Baltimore Bridge collapse, and for all those who rely on the bridge to commute, and for the region in general, for those who rely on the business of the port for their livelihood. May they recover fully and in time return to a more ordered life. We ask thy blessing for Senator Don Ibsen, whose wife has been hospitalized. May she receive the care she needs for a successful recovery. Lastly, Father, we ask thy blessing for our friend and many years a Diamond member, Keith Bozeman, and his family, whose loved one Judy has passed. May their memories of her keep her close and comfort them. And for thy blessing for Keith as he undergoes cancer treatment, may he have family support and may he return to good health. Father, we humbly ask these blessings in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Starting with the Revolutionary War, women served the Army both on and off the battlefield, caring for soldiers and helping wherever they could. Women faced the same harsh conditions as soldiers, but still they held strong through these hardships to provide invaluable service to the Continental Army. One of these women was Margaret Cochran Corbin. Margaret was born in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, November 12, 1751, but by the age of 5, she was orphaned when her father was killed during an Indian raid and her mother taken captive. Margaret and her brother were then raised by an uncle. She married John Corbin from the colony of Virginia in 1772, and he joined the Pennsylvania militia 3 years later as an artilleryman. With John joining the army, Margaret chose to join him as a camp follower, staying in the army camps and performing a variety of tasks such as sewing, cooking, laundry, and caring for injured soldiers. Though not official members of the army, these women received rations and a small wage, but rarely took part in fighting. However, at the Battle of Fort Washington, Margaret was a rare exception. The Army sent John's artillery regiment to protect Fort Washington from an impending British and Hessian attack. The British bombarded Fort Washington's defenses before they could launch their assault. Since John served as a matros loading the cannon, Margaret brought water to John to cool the guns. Upon delivering water, British cannon fire struck and killed her husband. She immediately ran to the cannon to fill John's role on the crew. With her help with the cannon, British continued firefighting and hit Margaret, causing severe wounds. The British captured the remaining Patriot forces. British doctors saved Margaret's life, and after receiving treatment, the British Army returned her and several prisoners to the Continental Army to recover in a Philadelphia hospital. She ultimately lost the use of her left arm, impeding her ability to perform everyday tasks. On July 6, 1779, in recognition of her bravery at Fort Washington, Congress awarded Margaret the first pension received by a woman in American history, but they granted her only half of what a man would have received. The Army sent her to West Point, New York, which was home to the Invalid Regiment, where she lived until her death in 1800. The soldiers she fought with remembered her courage at the Battle of Fort Washington. Margaret Corbin's story not only illustrates her tenacity, it also shows the sacrifices many women endured to aid the American cause. It fostered inspiration to future generations of young women to serve their country and fight to uphold the American dream. And now will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are going to be really quick today. No, it's blinking. I just want to welcome our new members. Can you hear me? We have two that are here today, two new members, Gail Cudworth and Gary Henderson. Is Gary here? Gary, hi. Welcome. And then we haven't recognized our representatives who joined as GEM members this year. You can't hear. I don't know. Thank you to Walt Brooks and Colin Jack for joining as GEM members. I got your goals. And for coming today. And we have membership information over here. If you haven't joined or renewed for the year, please do. We welcome all members and we love our associate members who are men or people who don't live in this district to join. So please join us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, now we're to the fun part. You guys ready? We're gonna let you guys take like 3 to 5 minutes, whatever, to talk about something, some of the bills you worked on, something you want to highlight for us. And then we'll open it up to some questions from the group, if that's okay. So, any volunteers? We'll start with Senator Vickers.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to come here today. And this is something, I've been doing for some time, representing Washington County for, I guess, 12 years. And it's always one of the highlights is to come to this group. You guys really do it right. So we appreciate it. Also appreciate those that came up during the session and were up on the hill. And we were able to meet with you as well. So I tell people that every session has its own personality, and each one does, and I also tell people that, the adjectives usually stay the same, and sometimes the topics change, and sometimes they don't. But I also want to just recognize, and it was sad to see the passing of Judy, Bozeman. She's always feisty, but she was always fair. She always had a question for us, and she was always pretty pointed, but at the same token, she was fair. And I miss her face here in your audience. So my best wishes to her family as they go through this difficult time. But this session started out with a couple of big bills early on, and we've done that 2 years in a row now. I actually think that that's a good way to do things, especially if you've got bills that have been discussed, that those two did. They had some discussion and went through. The one that was on DEI and also inclusion, and then also the one dealing with, protecting females in bathrooms and gyms and dressing rooms. And so those were kind of taken care of early in the session. It set a tone and allowed us to move forward. Before the session, both the Senate and the House actually got together with all of our colleagues. We put together a list of our priorities. It was interesting because when we got done, independently, but when we got done, we start comparing, and they're pretty much the same list. So as you go down through, there's an awful lot of work done in energy. Representative Jack was a key figure in that. He's a great asset to our legislature because of his expertise in those areas. Water is always a big issue this year, and just kind of a side note, we get an awful lot of pressure and a lot of interest in the Great Salt Lake, and rightfully so. Sometimes we have to remind people that not all rivers flow and all streams flow into the Great Salt Lake, so I'll have to watch that front. But the interesting note is that you'll see the Great Salt Lake rise this year, if not as much, maybe even more than last year, simply because the reservoirs are full. We had a great year last year. We're really abundant, and so we'll see that. But there are some important things with water as well. Education, between higher ed and public ed, we put another $1 billion of money into education. Housing, homelessness are always critical issues. Criminal justice, infrastructure, Fiscal responsibility, this is the fourth year in a row that we have passed an income tax cut. SB 169 reduced the income tax another 10 basis points. So it went, over the last 4 years, it's gone from 4.95 to 4.55. And you know we have a flat tax. Also worked on some things with social media. One bill that I'll kind of give you some homework on. Go back and look at SB 57. So we're constantly concerned about working with the federal government, regulations, especially right now, regulations that are coming out of the Biden administration that we really don't have a lot of control over, and how, we put in place SB 57 that if we run into something like that, and unfortunately, I think we are going to run into something really quickly, that if there's an agency guideline that we just can't meet, then it's a process where the legislature and the governor can get together and say, no, I'm sorry, we're just not going to do it. And so we'll see how that goes, but it is a bill that you need to go back and review. It's SB 57. Scott Sandel was the Senate sponsor, and I apologize, I can't remember who the House sponsor was. But with that, I think that's just a brief overview, and we'll turn it over to the rest of the crew here.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
We request that you guys stand.
Oh, sure.
If you don't mind.
This is all I got right here, baby. I'll work the best I can. Anyway, thank you for letting us be here. And that prayer was absolutely wonderful for Judy, for Don Ibsen's wife that's going into dialysis today. She was such a wonderful person, Judy was. We're going to miss her. This session was actually a great session. I think we moved a lot of conservative principles forward further than we had before. Senator Vickers discussed a lot about the transgender bathrooms, DEI. I'm the chair of natural resources, so I get the water bills and the land bills that come, and we had a lot of bills. And one of the things that well, at least I try to do, and I know the committee does, we dig deep into each one of those bills. Because there's so many of them, we want to make sure that how they work together, because there is some outside influences that are trying to push federal control of our lands and our water. You've heard different things where they're trying to make air and clean trees and stuff to be something that can be traded on the stock exchange and be able to use those revenues to kind of control our land. So we need to be aware of those and constantly fight and make sure we have policies and procedures in place that prevent this from happening. A few of the things that we worked on for St. George, particularly Washington County, one was an EMS bill. Now, trying to get people to serve in EMS out in the rural counties is really difficult. And so what they tried to do is give them, a long time ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, they created a little pocket of money that if you're serving in EMS in the rural counties, that they'll help pay for your insurance. So there's motivation to go work there and give your time to help people in rural. But it was only for rural counties. We're no longer considered a rural county. They call them the classes. There's 6 classes, and when we were a 3rd class and we went to a 2nd class, that means that you're 175,000 people to 1 million people. Well, we're 190-something thousand. We just barely crossed that line, so we lost that ability to benefit our rural EMS agents. So we went to work. This was a bill that Senator Johnson worked on, did a great job, and it failed in committee. And I'm like, whoa, we can't let this fail. He's from Logan. He's got the same issue going up on there. So I went and talked to the chair. We said, what do we need to do? He's like, this can get too out of control because we have other counties, Utah County, that likes to abuse some of these things. And so we went and found, we very clearly articulated if the community or towns are less than 3,000 people, then you can still qualify. So even though our 2nd class county doesn't qualify, Enterprise, Vail, Taco, all these out there in the Colorado City area, they can still qualify for these benefits for people to get the help out rural. We have 6 million people that come through every year, and it's not you guys that decide to go on a walk on a July afternoon without any water. It's some guy I know. So we need these people to be able to be there to help make sure that people stay safe. And we did a lot of things. I'm going to let them talk about some other things, but I'm so grateful for the tax cut. That's $170 million just the last 4 years. We've reduced ongoing taxes by $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion less that we're collecting from just the last 4 years, and hopefully we can keep going. We hope to stay.
That's not what I'm supposed to do, is it? It's great to be. I was supposed to sing. You know what? Speaking of that, these two fine gentlemen to my right were part of a 4-part barbershop quartet at the closing day of the House of Representatives, and they did an amazing job. I don't know, I think maybe we should have them do it. They said they've got to have the other two guys and they can't do it, but speaking of singing.
They got two.
Hey, it's great to be with all of you today. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you for all of your efforts to try and move Republican principles here in Washington County and across our state. And I say across our state because we see you at the state capitol, and you're engaged, and your voice matters, and you have a big impact. And so I want to first begin by just saying thank you for your advocacy and your efforts to support Republican principles. The second thing I wanted to mention is as it relates to hello. As it relates to the session, I want to talk about a couple of very specific things. Okay, the first thing I want to mention is that the Utah House of Representatives and the Senate and the governor right now are working in a very effective way to get conservative policies moved forward for our state. Doesn't mean that everybody agrees all the time, but there is a very concerted effort to move conservative policies led by Republican principles across our state, and that's very difficult in almost anywhere else in the country, and we're having a lot of success. So I want you to know that I think that's a great success. And sometimes when you hear about politics, you hear about all of the fighting that goes on. And in this particular case, we are very much aligned around getting some things done. I'm going to speak about two of my specific assignments, and I want to speak to them directly. So first of all, I serve on House Education. I'm fortunate to have Representative Elison on that committee with me. It's a fantastic committee. Let me mention a couple of things on education I think are really important. Number one, there was and I regret that Senator Ripson was not here to speak to it, but there was an enormous amount of effort put into school safety, and he was the Senate sponsor of that bill. But we're really working hard to make sure that all of our schools in the state of Utah are safe, and that's a really important thing for not just all of our children, but all of our families and all the citizens of the state of Utah. $100 million went into school safety this last session. Number two on education that I think is really important is we have, over the past couple of years, increased education funding by 56%. It's a significant increase, and our schools are well funded. One thing that's an important statistic for you to know: our school teachers starting salaries in the state of Utah are higher than any of our neighboring states. We've really made a commitment to make sure that we're properly and adequately funding education. And then the third thing I want to mention about education is there's a whole number of bills, and without going into all the details for the bills, but we're working really hard to make sure that school is not a place where we advocate ideology. You're hearing about all kinds of crazy stuff being taught across the country. In the state of Utah, we're saying no to the kinds of ideologies that would pit our students against one another or label them either as inferior or inadequate or incapable of success or racist or oppressor or oppressed. We're not doing any of that in the state of Utah, so thank you. So we can have a good educational experience if we have a safe environment, we have good educators, and we can focus on education as opposed to this other thing. So that's an important thing in our public education. This last session, I'm Vice Chair of Appropriations for higher ed. And in higher ed, we've started to move and do some of the same things. So I want you to think about this is really important. We did a couple of really important things. We said the president of the university is responsible for what happens in the university, right? That seems like a funny thing to do, but we wanted to make it clear, not just to the presidents, but to all of the other people working in the institutions, that the president is responsible for what happens, and there's an accountability process there. We did a really important, I think one of the best in the country, tenure bills. And what that tenure bill did was it said, look, if you're an experienced professor and you earn tenure, you're not unleashed for the rest of your life, your career in higher ed. There's a 5-year review process where there's some accountability, and we want people to have a successful and fantastic career in higher education. But there's also an accountability process for what you do and the work that happens. And then the other one that's really important, and Senator Vickers mentioned this, and it started at the beginning of the session, but it was a multi-year effort to get to this place where we're able to have a DEI bill go through that said very clearly and very emphatically that we're not going to advance ideology. The institution is not taking a position in all of this stuff that you hear about online. We're not dividing people, categorizing people, putting them against one another. We're not doing that in our institutions of higher education. We're focusing on education, and very, very quietly and we've had many people in the higher education community say thank you. We were feeling so much pressure from what was happening nationally and even from our faculty that we needed somebody to have our back, and thank you, you actually helped us out. We don't want to be involved in this kind of advocacy, but we were feeling so much pressure. And so those are some important things that I wanted you to know about that I think were big wins for this session.
Well, thanks for having us. Let me talk about one bill that I worked on together with a lot of you here in this room, and it was HB 424. And it was to deal with lewdness with children. And it was a bill that we worked on a couple of years. Senator Vickers was the Senate sponsor, and he helped us get it over the finish line. But a lot of you came up multiple times and testified in the House and in the Senate committees, because each bill, right, goes through a House Rules Committee, then a House Committee, and then the House floor, and then the Senate Rules, and then the Senate Committee, and then the Senate floor. And so there's multiple opportunities for a bill to get tripped up, and multiple opportunities for people to come testify. So Alexis came up. How many times did you come up?
Every time.
Every time this session and last. Michelle came up. Haley came up. I think, did you come up and help Joanne? Yeah. So it was a big deal. And what we did is we put some details in code about what is not appropriate to do in front of children. You might think that it was obvious, but apparently it's not. And after we Senator Vickers and I tried a similar bill last session, and we couldn't get it across the finish line. But then as people came to know that we were working on a bill all across the state, as these kind of inappropriate, risque, and lewd performances were being directed at children, people were calling their state representatives and saying, you've got to do something. And you know what those rotten things did? They sent them all to me. They said, oh, call Representative Jack. He's working on that. So I got so many phone calls and texts and videos and emails of all of the terrible things that went on in the state in the last year. And so when I sat down with the drafting attorney, I said, look, these are the things. I said, I'm not going to show you the photos or the videos because I don't want you to arrest me. But let me just tell you, these are the things that are being done, and we need to describe them in legal terms and say that's not okay. We're not saying you can't do that between consenting adults. We're saying you can't involve children in this. So that resonated with our colleagues. We were careful to avoid First Amendment issues. Anyway, long detailed story. It's a lot of fun, but that bill got passed, and so I was very happy with that. And I know you'd all be disappointed if we didn't talk a little bit about energy. So another bill that I worked on with Senator Vickers, and we got this assignment, last summer. And there was a energy working group of senators and representatives trying to deal with how does Utah avoid the pitfalls of having shortages of electricity that other states around us have all fallen into. And so our colleagues said, would you guys please work on rewriting the state energy policy? And so that was a pretty big project, and we went through and rewrote it. We organized it, we simplified it, we gave a lot of definitions. I got to sit as the engineer across from the drafting attorney and explain engineering concepts, and he got to try to figure out what the heck I was saying and put it into legalese, and it went in. Anyway, so that also got passed and was signed by the governor. So that was very important. But then one other kind of under or overarching concept that we worked on, there were several bills. I had HB 191, Senator Owens, who's not with us, had SB 161, and Senator Sandel, we talked about Senator Sandel. He and Representative Albrecht did SB 224, and all of those, the common goal, and you might have read some of this in the news recently, the last couple of days, some of the media who are not here today, some of the other media have kind of been unhappy that these bills got passed and signed into law. But the goal of those bills were to, and this is pretty radical, to keep the lights on in Utah and in the Western United States. So keep the power plants open, not saying that the power plants are going to be open forever, because nothing lasts forever, although they're well maintained and they're lasting for a long time. But let's not tear them down prematurely until they've been replaced with something of equal or greater capacity. And so there's not many power plants in the West. And they're getting fewer every day, but the ones in Utah now, we have protected that they have to be replaced before they're torn down. So that's kind of a short version of a couple of things that I had a chance to work with my colleagues on. Thank you.
It is an honor to be here. Thank you for all you do. I might echo the sentiments of everyone, these gentlemen. It's such a privilege to work with capable people. And that's one of the things I'm learning very quickly, is that there are some very, very capable people that are up presenting bills, right? Drafting and getting bills presented, drafted, passed, and so forth. But also, all of you, as they've mentioned before, there's a lot of folks behind the scenes. There's a lot that goes into the concept of a bill, getting a lot of input from public, and then helping get that across the finish line. So all of you that engage in that process, we really appreciate it, because you help us stay connected to the voters, and that's who we're responsible to. And so it's an absolute honor to be able to serve you and to be able to make sure that your needs are being met legislatively in the state of Utah. So everything they've said, I totally agree with. We've had some great things. I think from my perspective, one of the big issues of this was the state sovereignty issue of this session, and I think it's going to be going forward. And I think we're feeling that nationwide, is as we see the federal government continue to be out of control and want to infuse themselves into our lives, we are working very, very hard as a state to make sure that we maintain our sovereignty, that we make sure that they stay within their lane as we try to progress and stay within our lane, and make sure that we stay free as the state of Utah. So one of those may not be a huge deal, but a lot of you have reached out to me and have asked about it, and that's the question of digital currency, for example. And that was one that Representative Jack and I, we both opened up a bill file. There was another freshman class member that opened up the bill file, and we said, you know what, Representative Clancy, why don't you run with it? Because we got plenty to do, you go for it. And that basically says that in Utah, we're not going to recognize a central bank digital currency as legal tender in the state of Utah. And that's a big one, right? To make sure we maintain that sovereignty there as well. A couple of the other ones too, I love with the homelessness bill. One of the things that we do right in Dixie, there's a lot of things we do right down here, but one of them is how we handle homelessness. And a lot of people say, what homelessness? And my question is, see, we do it right. We have the Switch Point program here in Washington County, and it literally is the envy of, well, the right people, it's the envy further up the state you go. Homelessness in some of the northern parts are not functioning like they should be. So that bill actually changed significantly how the homelessness is going to be addressed. And its intention is to have everybody north of us kind of look at what we're doing down here, and let's try to mimic and copy what we're doing down here, because it is working down here. And so we're hoping that that is the case. And just for your information, so as far as data on that, we get about $7, I think it is $7 per day per bed in the Switch Point. Salt Lake City homeless shelter gets $70 per day per bed. They get 10 times the funding, and yet look how dysfunctional it is with 10 times the funding. And here we are with much, much less funding and doing even way better than they are. So there's a lot that Dixie can teach the rest of the state of Utah, and that's what we're trying to do. One of the bills too that was fairly significant that came through our education committee, and I think was briefly mentioned, but I wanted to just mention it once more. That was Representative Ivory's HB 29. Several of us helped co-sponsor that, and that's the removal of pornographic materials in school. So we have already in code the definition of what is called sensitive materials. It shouldn't be a problem, right? You have a definition. This is what's called sensitive materials. You have subjective and objective materials. And you would think that it would be easy to just say, school, please just take out these materials that aren't okay. Now, I'm going to go to the defense of some folks in some of the school districts. And that is because I do have a sister who is a librarian in Washington County School District. And they oftentimes will put in an order for books. And there'll be more books show up than what they've ordered. Okay, so that it does happen. And so not every librarian throughout the state is able to read every single book that comes through, because sometimes it's hundreds and hundreds of books. So it's awesome that parents and students are staying diligent in helping the school district see if there's a book. For example, my wife teaches at Brooklyn High School, and she had a student come up to her and said, hey, Mrs. Elison, here's a book that I think is inappropriate. My wife looked at the book, said, sure enough, it's not appropriate, took it to the principal. The principal was sure enough, threw it in the trash can, it was done, right? So in my opinion, that's how it should be. But we had to kind of standardize, and it may not be the right way, but that's how it happened that way. But this bill basically gives a standard by which these books should be removed, and it is specifically to pornographic materials, which there shouldn't be a question about that. But now there's a statewide standard of how this should be done, and so that should help a lot of school districts finally get to the point where they can remove these types of materials and not have them in front of our kids, because they should not be anywhere near our kids. And of course, my comment in our committee meeting was, because it's interesting how the Democrats were all wanting to kill this bill. And I'm thinking, why would you want to keep pornographic material in schools? And my comment was that, parents still want to buy that crap for their kids. They can go to Amazon, they can buy it. And if they want to give it to their kids, I guess they have the right as a parent, but I just don't want it in my schools. So that's what we did there. Let's see. So those are probably some of the highlights in addition to what these gentlemen have said. But going forward, I still think that the state sovereignty issue is going to be a big issue. That's one of my primary issues that I keep trying to address, and we'll get there because there's a big focus on tax reduction because we want to continue to reduce income taxes. I know that's a big for us. I know Representative Brooks has been working on reducing taxes on Social Security, which I'm totally in favor of because that's my clientele. And so I'm totally wanting to see that happen. But also, I did get a bill filed open just to create some attention to it, but against state sovereignty financially. Again, that idea of getting us financially independent of the federal government. That's still going to be a push that I'm going to work on. We're going to see that bill come back. At some point, leadership will dovetail that with their ideas of tax reduction. And we're going to get that across the finish line at some point because that's huge. And then the other one I'm going to be tackling too this next, during the interim, is our online education in high school. A lot of you may not know, but there are, online education is a great way to supplement the education process for kids in high school. And there's several sources for online education. But what's happening is there's a lot of students that will not go to school, they take an online class, and this has happened at Herpin High School. In fact, Herpin High School, they just let 4 teachers go this year because there's that many kids dropping out of school to take online classes, because they can take a whole quarter's worth of school in about 2 days. They're not learning anything. And all they're doing is there's like 5 or 6 primary websites that they can go to. They can cut and paste the answers to the questions. And they're not proctored. These tests aren't proctored. So they sit at their computer, cut and paste the answers, they pass the class in about a day and a half or 2 days. So I've already got a focus group we've got set up. We're meeting next week. We're going to be addressing this with our online guys in Quinn. Tillis, I can't remember his last name. And anyway, we're going to tackle that one because it's unfair for our high school principals to give a diploma to a student that actually didn't attend that high school, nor did they pass at the rigor of the school itself. And so that's going to be a huge one that we're going to be looking at this year too.
Thank you. All right, we have recruited our great Vice Chairman, Barry Sawyer. He's going to moderate the questions today. So I'm going to turn the time over to him. If you have more note cards, just hold them up and we'll come around and get them.
All right, now the pressure's really on.
Answer 12.
Okay, so as we're going through this, I'll start with you, Evan, and then we'll go down. A couple of these questions, it'd be helpful maybe if everyone has an answer. If it's not just the same, yeah, me too. But if you have something different, that might be on that. The one I wanted to, I dropped these just a second ago. We had a couple of people that were asking, what bill did you want to pass, but it didn't? Is it still something that we can move forward with?
Yeah, for me, it's easy, and that's Joe's bill. Is it HB 442? Is that the right number? So that was a bill that Representative Elison worked on a year ago to try to get a tax structure to allow for some additional money to go into EMS, even shift some money from property tax to sales tax. When we passed it a year ago, found out in trying to implement it, need to do some modifications. But, and I'll let him explain a little more detail, but the bottom line this year, it did not pass. It got through the House. It did not come up on the board in the Senate. So that's a bill that we need to work on, maybe even during a special session. But that's one we need to work on.
There was 2 bills that I worked on that didn't pass this year that I was disappointed. One was Social Security tax reduction. We put all those eggs into income tax, which will affect everybody. So we'll be running that bill again. So right now, we moved the threshold. So if you made less than $32,000, which is almost poverty level, 2 people, you didn't pay on taxes. We've raised that over the last 4 years up to $75,000. This bill I had was up to $90,000. So we're trying to chip away at that big nugget. So eventually we can just get it away altogether. So we'll be running that bill again. One bill that we ran, it passed, but it didn't get funded. So it's just like it didn't pass. And we changed the way that we do our state parks. Instead of giving them money every year, we said, you need to be accountable for what happens in your park, live within your means to operate. So in 2012, they run their own budgets. So the fees that they collect runs the park. And it's great because if you never go to the park, you don't have to pay any taxes for the park. If you use the park, you pay for it. So we're trying to figure out how we can help this group. Well, when they made that transfer, they didn't change how they use what's called a restricted account. They have $40 million in a restricted account, but they don't keep the interest for it. It goes to the general budget. And so it's like $2 million. We're like, well, let's keep that in the park because they're supposed to maintain and run. And everybody's like, yeah, that's a good business practice. Let's do that. Because what happens is that now we can say, if costs escalate, which they do, we don't have to raise the fee for citizens because this year they changed it for out of state, they're going to double it. So make sure that we're not displacing citizens. If you go out to San Hollow, you can't go there sometimes because it's all Nevada plates. So they're trying to say, how can we balance this a little bit better? Well, it went through, it passed the House, it passed the Senate, but there was no money. we had to cut $2 million from somewhere, and that didn't work. So it failed because it didn't get the funding requirement. So we'll run that again next year. Hopefully we can even put an option is if they're not going to fund the whole thing, let's maybe fund a third of it. So we can get that process to where we need to be. We are a self-sufficient state, and we should make sure that all of our departments are working that way.
One of the bills that I was disappointed didn't pass was House Bill 303. It was sponsored by Representative Stenquist. This bill, it did a couple of things, but one of the specific targets was trying to eliminate the certain types of advocacy within schools. And one of the specific things was being addressed was, frankly, rainbow flags, gay pride flags in classrooms. And the bill, because of some other content, was having difficulty building support. So I ran a substitute that we got passed, which I thought was going to get us enough support to get the bill through, but it didn't end up coming out of the House. And so that's what I'd like to see addressed. There was some erroneous articles that came out after that bill failed to pass. One of them was, I can't remember if it was a Salt Lake Tribune article, but it said the state authorizes the display of gay pride flags in school classrooms. And that's not at all what happened. That totally mischaracterized the events around what the current policies are with the State Board of Education and what the issues, this whole issue. It mischaracterized all of that. It was really frustrating to see that happen after the work that went in. So that's one that I think that we're going to try and revisit and figure out how to address that particular issue.
So I had a very fruitful session this year, thankfully, and with the help of all my colleagues. But the one bill that I didn't be able to get advanced was HB 474. You didn't hear about it because I got it from the sheriff. The sheriff sat with me and said, there are all of these things going on in the legal system, and we've got to fix them. And he told me stories, and I said, holy cow, those are awful. We've got to do something about that. So I said, but you've now exceeded my capacity to remember. So, so you and I and my drafting attorney have to get on the same phone call, and you need to explain this to them so they can draft the bill. So we were on a rather long phone call, and he explained what was happening and what we needed. We had the county attorney with us. And so we drafted HB 474, and I really liked what we had. It was like, I don't know, 5 million pages long. The thing, it was a beast. But as we got working through the process, other drafting attorneys said, oh, well, this piece we've already got in another bill. Let's put it in that bill and let it go through. And we said, great, we cut that off. And then another piece, this could go with that bill. So we cut 2 pieces off and put them in other bills, and they went through. But then as we got through, one of the pieces that became a real choking point was on a bail schedule. And they said, oh boy, we've been trying to get this passed for years now. And we better cut that out because we'll never get that done in this session. So we said, all right, well, let's work on that during the interim. So we cut the bail part out to work on. And then there was another part, the drug equivalents. And they said, holy cow, did you mean powder or liquid or cut or uncut? So we said, well, I'm not a chemist. I don't know. So we put that into another study to do drug equivalents. And then we had a single thing in the bill, and I thought, okay, this we're going to do. And then we ran into that the defense attorneys didn't like where we were at, and I'm used to that. But the prosecuting attorneys were also uncomfortable with how to make it work. And so I said, all right, well then what do we need to do? And they said, could we please study it in interim? So now a third piece went to interim study. So that bill that we had, that I got the ideas from the sheriff, it got cut into 5 pieces. 2 pieces got passed, 3 of them are interim study. And so I was disappointed we couldn't get something across the line on that, but we'll work on that this summer and we'll get 2 or 3 more pieces.
I'll be quick, because when Barry starts to walk around, you know we've been too long on that question. So yeah, the bill that Senator Vickers mentioned, that is one we're going to be focusing on this year. EMS is a huge issue statewide, actually. Part of what they called the baseball bill was was going to have some funding for EMS. We were able to get that changed where it wasn't going to be a statewide tax. It was going to be centralized tax, which I thought was better policy, but that cut out the EMS side. So that's going to be a big topic anyway. And that was in part why I think my bill didn't get heard in the Senate, is because they wanted to have a bigger comprehensive discussion about EMS statewide and how is that going to look, how is that going to be affected. So I did speak with the speaker just a couple of days ago, and I get to be at that table when we have those discussions, and so I felt that was fair. It seems how my bill wasn't able to be heard, and so we're going to be working on that, so it'll be interesting to see what we come up with for EMS funding statewide as well as for Washington County.
All right, thank you. I know that probably can be a little bit of a buzzkill, but we have to keep it down to me. Even though I love the answers, I could be here all day, but I know there's a lot of people who can't. Along those lines, with people asking questions, you wanted to know more, wanted to be able to be availability. One of the questions that I'm going to put kind of together, along with how people are allowed to say, get a hold of. The question is, do you prefer emails, phone calls from citizens about impact and what they do? With that, another person says, well, how do you determine what your constituents want to support and vote for? This person's experience says emails have not been returned, voicemails have been unanswered, text messages unanswered, and they were a delegate. And so they're trying to find out what's the best way to get a hold of you, and do you feel like you're returning the emails and the contacts? Do they have something wrong? That's the question. How can we be more interactive with you guys without, and keep in mind, people, we can't hound them to death with our complaints, because there's a lot of people live in this county that might not feel exactly the same way you do. So it's good to get a hold of them, but not take up all their time at the same time. So if you have a just quick answer, you have it all set to go, just go down the line real quick. What's the best way you want to be contacted?
The all above, but I have a process that we're doing when we're not in session. Once a week, I sit down with my staff. We're very fortunate in the Senate. We have legislative staff that works with us. I have a legislative assistant who works with about 5 or 6 senators, and she and I sit down each week and go through everything that's come in. We craft answers. Some she takes care of. I tell her what we want to say. She crafts that, send it out. Others I do personally. Sometimes I do have a government phone that I receive texts and phone messages on. I return those. I just take care of all myself. But that's the best way for me personally. And during the session, I have a process there too. I have an intern who works with that legislative assistant, but I turn the government phone over to my intern during the session, and then each day actually we sit down and spend time going over emails and messages and making sure that those are getting responded to.
For me, email is the best way because I have a record and I can always go back and look. And as these gentlemen know, I put together a pretty extensive spreadsheet that keeps track of all my constituents, all the different, like the sheriffs, the schools, and all their positions on every bill. So I can have that reviewed while I'm in committee or I'm on the floor. I can quickly see how many constituents sent something. But the key is, and this is really the key, you have to identify who you are. Because I get like 1,000 emails, and I get them from people from California and Colorado and New York, and I put them in my representative bucket called the garbage can because I don't represent them. So if I don't know who it is, it's really hard for me to validate it, to give it credit, or just to respond back to. So if it says, I am this person, I live at this address, then we make sure that we respond back to the best we can. And of course, we miss things because things are going a million miles an hour. But my intern and myself can both see my emails, so it makes it much easier to keep track of, make sure that we follow that all the way to the end.
Email's great. It's easy for me to say, okay, I can get back to that later, leave it unread, and respond to it. Please make sure that you say I'm a resident of Washington County, I'm a resident of your district. Somehow identify yourself. That's the most important thing. I think that particularly when there's a lot of things going on, I'll acknowledge, I'm sure there's some things that get missed, and when we miss them, we apologize, it's not intentional. But it does really help if you will identify yourself as a resident of Washington County, and that'll make it a lot easier for us to say, that's a message I need to return. We all have a similar file as Representative Brooks. It's a round file and everything perishes when it hits it. And we get lots of messages from all over the place, so.
Ditto to what they said, but with one addition, I use the same spreadsheet that Representative Brooks created, and my intern helps me with that. But please, don't just say, I'm your constituent and I voted for you. Put your address too, because I get a lot of emails that say, I'm your constituent and I voted for you, and my address is Salt Lake, or my address is Park City. And so those get in, yeah, they get filed, where Walt said, immediately, because we're getting like 5 million a day. And so the ones I try to respond to are the ones who say, and my address is St. George or Washington or Leeds, folks that I know, okay, I'm going to try to get back to them. I might be the worst at getting back, but I at least am paying attention. I'm putting the response in the spreadsheet. And if I don't know, if it just comes from Bob or Joe or Betty or Sue, then I'm just like, I don't know, this could be anyone.
To what they said, personally, I'm a text person, so email is great because then I have the information. But if you do email me, shoot me a text, say I emailed you on such and such a date, because we'll get canned emails and there'll be like 200 or 300 and they're the identical email. I'm telling you right now, I throw those all away. I don't care who they're from. If someone's not going to give me a real question that's not just a big mailing list, that's not going to work with me. But also, just a heads up too, and you guys I think are all pretty sharp on this, but please spread the word. We'll get requests during session. Oh, we need to do this. We got to work on this bill, and it's like, it's too late. Now is the time to be talking about items that you want to address at the next session is now, right? But when we're 3 weeks into the session, we're getting new requests for information. That's too late, right? So just a heads up on that.
All right. So I have a few questions that are kind of added together, and they kind of go together. There's a couple of really, this thing should be like flat. But there's a couple of items that kind of coincide together as I ask these questions, because it's going to be a little bit about, is it our best interest to be involved in the baseball stadium in Salt Lake? And if that's being the case, doesn't that maybe overshadow the $1 billion education and where that's going to go and how that's going to go? And then with illegal immigrants, I want to ask these questions, but I think the answer could be done. I appreciate if you get 2 minutes less. If you can't, stay after and we'll talk. But as we address where that billion is going to go and what that's going to do down here affect us, what you guys have involved with that from the education spending, how do we get more of that down this way? Should we really be talking about the baseball stadium the whole time and make that such a big deal? And the other thing that I wanted to add to that with the education, we talked a little bit about it earlier with the $7 coming to Switch Point as opposed to $70. Well, is it the same situation? Would be the question. A lot of people feel that we have made it easier for illegal immigrants to get jobs, to be released from prison, illegal immigration children to get the taxpayer-funded health insurance. What have you done to make Utah less attractive to illegal immigrants, and how can we handle that with just, I know that we received from the Sheriff Smith talking a little bit about what ICE does and what the Sanctuary City does and how it affects us, but what can we do to make sure that we have a lot of these problems not happening? And so some of the things that come with the illegals would also be federal dollars for education or for funding of anything that they're not going to want to give us because we might not say the right words. So what we want to know is, how is that $1 billion being broke down? You know, we don't have any commissions. I have it right here. Delineation of boards and commissions, where did the money go? How does that 830 million in public education go to teachers, to schools, to buildings? How is 20 million really going to help people buy a house in this type of economy? So I'm kind of putting these together because I think they all work within each other. We're running after a baseball stadium. We have lots of illegal agreements. We have education. How are we going to make sure that the money is spent properly? Dixie gets some of that money, and how we can help make it so it's not just overrun by the federal government and or state governments, that we have some connections here. Does that make sense at all on those questions? Does anybody have that? I did that bad on that one. But I kind of put them together because I think they all work together. We do have issues in each one of those. We want to know how we're going to help them best.
I'll try if you want. Go ahead, Evan.
Oh.
You want me to start? Yeah.
So Barry, you couldn't even take 2 minutes to ask the question.
I tried to limit it to 4 questions, because I know you guys are only take 10 minutes.
Okay, let me try to be succinct, okay? The $1 billion that I mentioned, you know, between public ed and higher ed, there was $1 billion of new money was in. Most of it on the public ed side, most of that comes through the WPU, which is the basic funding mechanism of the schools, and so it'll follow the student. So the more students you have, you know, the more money you'll get into your system. Higher education was broken down here again in a similar fashion. Neil can talk specifically about that, but it's kind of a similar fashion. The stadium, so yeah, I think it's kind of cool that we could actually have Major League Baseball in the state of Utah. The controversy came, so the Miller family, who has been very benevolent, and especially for the whole state, but especially in that Salt Lake area, they put a lot of money into homelessness and other things. They're putting about $3.5 billion in. The stadium was proposed to be funded with creating a park district, so the 200 plus acres where the park is, it would be like an RDA, so it'd be any of the increment rate coming up. The controversy did rely with the TRT, which was being proposed to have a 1.5%, so the patron, and it was misunderstood that the hotelier would be paying, that actually the patron would be paying on a $200 room, a $300 tax. But I give my credit to my colleagues, and especially I know Representative Elison and I have talked about this, and I know that he played a part in that in helping everybody recognize that probably wasn't appropriate right now. And that part of it got pulled out, so I feel good about that. As far as the immigrant side, to be honest with you, I don't know the details of how many illegal immigrants we have in the state. I just don't. I don't know those statistics. I know there's a national dialogue about it, and that sometimes that doesn't translate. We find that doesn't translate to Utah. So I don't know. There is money obviously in homelessness. There may be some of that. Some of the people that are using that. But to be honest with you, I think in that area, me personally, I just need some more data, trying to kind of hone in. That's one of the things I feel like we need to do this during here.
Well, there's a lot of good questions. Let's talk about the money for education first. There's lanes and there's policies that are really supposed to be stayed within. So we as the legislature, we do the budget on the state level, and then we give that money to education to what they call LEAs, or local education association, like their school district out here. They have an elected board. We elect school board members, and they're the ones how they basically apply those funds given to them, which is what we exactly need. So this money actually gets 2 looks. It gets 2 representatives, us that get it in the first place, and then our local guys to put it where we want. And I think people forget about our school district. They're like back there in the shade a little bit. We need to make sure that we're holding them accountable to putting those funds where we need to be. So the education part, I think, stays within the lanes that we've identified, and it's good tax policy from top to bottom. The baseball stadium, every one of us worked pretty hard on that and worked with leadership and the sponsor. That the TRT was not the appropriate way to get that fund from everybody in the state. In fact, in Southern Utah, half of our hoteliers that stay here are from Utah. You know, they come from Salt Lake because it's beautiful and that's Salt Lake. So we were able to change that a little bit. So that wasn't a part. But the bigger part of TRT was really, it takes the headroom out of what we need in Washington County. If there's another need for other search and rescue or any other else that we want to use visitors paying for visitors' cost, we would take the air out of the room with that kind of a cost. So we were able to deal with that. What was the last one? It was really good. Oh, immigrants. So getting a lot of this coming in, we have stuff with giving them Medicaid or Medicare, or what do we do with when they go to the emergency room? That's the most expensive way, but that's where they go. How do we mitigate some of that? My biggest issue dealing with was working with Sheriff Brooksby, he's got a pin on this thing. He knows where it's going. And a lot of it is, what do they do with them when they get them? They have to turn them to ice, and there's no place to put them. And so we have to work on the state level better with our federal partners and making sure that we get these people that are not supposed to be here, we get them taken care of and we get them moved out. We have to defend our own border. So, and as in the border of Utah. So there's a lot there. We have to work with our federal partners to make sure we can make a good, logical process that's clear and transparent.
The change of the stadium, it's local money, local taxes will pay for that. It's not diverting any money away from education. It's not diverting any money away from Washington County. I think it's a really important thing that when Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County said this is something that we want to do, we want to create a local tax to pay for that. We're going to support that, because if there's an infrastructure need in Washington County at some point in the future, we're going to need their support to be able to move forward on our policy. But you got to remember, they got to make that decision, and they're involved in that. That's not, it's not diverting money away from other state resources. And we're happy to get into that with anybody if you'd like to learn more details or be involved in that. Number two, I just want to say that Utah is not a sanctuary state. We're not. Thank you. We cannot solve the problems that we're facing that are impacting Utah without cooperation from the federal government, and we're not going to solve those problems with our current president or current administration. So vote for Trump. Utah is not complicit or in any way trying to be accommodative to that problem. We're suffering under the same policy problems that essentially don't allow us to fully enforce what is obvious to all of us as the law. So just be aware, Utah is not a sanctuary state, and we're not accommodating or making an effort in any way to do that. The last one I'll just mention is when it comes to education funding, Washington County School District and our local charter schools, they're funded very effective in a very high way. It's really a remarkable thing to see how well our schools are doing, both at generating educational outcomes with a lot less resources. And I think that's a compliment. That's not a diss. We could double the amount of per pupil spending like Clark County, and we could have a total wreck of a school district, right? Or go to California, where again, it's double the per pupil spending, and they can't even finish the buildings. We're doing everything's not perfect, but we're doing a really good job, and we need to recognize that as we continue to go down this path, there's opportunities for improvement. We're going to improve, but we're doing a really good job.
So dinner for what they said, I'm going to save 2 minutes.
I will just say one item here, and it's just kind of a reminder to all of us. These are super important policy issues, but please help us spread the word that we need to be a little bit more tactical like the Democrats have been. We need to focus on base hits, folks. We all want the home runs. There's no question. But we have got to get to the point where we feel really good about base hits. And right now, we're getting a lot of singles, a lot of doubles, a lot of triples right now in the state of Utah. And so sometimes we're not moving maybe as fast as we all want to go, but we also have to understand there's a lot of things at play with a lot of big issues. So please help spread the word that we need to feel good about base hits in the Republican Party, because that's how the Democrats have gotten where they are today, is they have gone base hit after base hit after base hit. And I'm tired of it. I want us to start getting base hits, have an occasional home run, but let's keep working on base hits. And that's what all of these policy issues that we're talking about. Utah is moving forward. We are a star in the states that everybody looks to, because we are doing things very, very well in the state of Utah. Yes, we have improvement to be made, but we're doing a really good job. So help us be okay with base hits, doubles, because we're going to get there. We're going to win the game if we stay focused on what's most important.
I know we're closely in there. I just wanted to, on those that we're talking about with the illegal immigration, I know on Facebook page, I'm trying to remember where it was, there is a whole letter from Sheriff Smith up in Utah County talking a little bit about the disconnect between federal, state, and even local sheriff's departments. There's
with ICE and.
with ICE and everything, yes. And so he explains that very well in there, probably better than you even hear. Because there's a lot of times there will be people here that they have not told anybody. They've told no mayor or sheriff or police department. They're just dropped off and put into things. And so we have to be diligent as citizens. Are we talking to our city commissioners? Are we talking to our county commissioners? Are we talking to our mayors? Are we talking? It's not just all here. I think it goes in each step of the way. We're reminding them every day, this is very important to us and our families. And so that's a good way to communicate with everybody. So then when we get to them, we'll say, well, look, here's all the things we've done. You guys don't seem to be pushing the envelope. Why and how can we do better?
So just one real quick thing on that too is, there was a whole controversy when ICE came out and tried to claim that, they were trying to make Utah a sanctuary state, even though we're not. And, the governor, the attorney general, and the Senate and House leadership was quick to respond to that and clarify. But if the article you're talking about with the sheriff from Utah County is all of the sheriffs in the state of Utah and all the jails refuse to work with ICE because of their requirements. They literally have that the prisoner has to use a certain brand of lotion, a certain brand of toothpaste. They have to have certain hours at certain times of daylight. And so they just said, we cannot abide by that. So every county in the state has refused to work with us. And that's why. So, to follow up on it.
And I know there's a lot more in that. And like I said, reach out to them with more emails, get more questions. I'm just going to go with this question, because I know that's a loaded one. We could go for hours on immigration, how it is. We are trying to vote in the right people that will at least be looking at it a little bit more. But a little bit closer to home was on is the $20 million even going to help on the housing? But also some of the states are canceling tax on Social Security. You talked about raising the money from the state. How about Social Security, the $32,000, and then you get taxed if you're working a job on top of that. And that's hurting a lot of people, especially in towns where we are more people coming in, the jobs are a little bit lower in some instances, and people have expensive livings without cost of living without able to do it. Somebody want to talk the Social Security, state tax, and then the $20 million.
Well, I can talk Social Security because I live downtown St. George, where all my friends are there, huh, Cleo? So we, the thing about Social Security is that the reason why we had tax on Social Security to begin with, you go back decades ago, Utah was not an economic powerhouse. We have lots of kids, and 2/3 of our land can't be taxed. So how do we fund schools? And we are the lowest funding. If you look at all the states, we fund the lowest. And I'm like, well, thank you for helping my 5 kids get through school. That's because we know that educated community, these kids we're gonna make us a better society. So, but now our economy is growing, and we're seeing more and more income tax and sales tax come to the state. So let's figure out where we can cut that we shouldn't be cutting, and Social Security is one of them. But to take out, we talked about how difficult it was to get rid of $2 million because we balance our budget. So it's just like your checkbook. You pay your utilities, your car payment. So where are you going to take $2,000? You got to not pay something, right? So we do another thing. I'm just going to jump real quick to a subject. We go through 20% of our budget from scratch every year to get rid of the junk. And we save a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars we cut out of our budget every year because we just don't want to say, well, we funded before, so let's keep doing a good idea. Well, now we got to these taxes. It was such a huge number. It's like $150 million. If we had a hard time cutting $2 million, who can cut for $150? And so we decided 4 years ago, the approach was, well, let's take chunks at a time. So we've been taking between $20 and $30 million a year off of that. Basically, the way we've done it is raise the threshold for, called it the adjusted gross income. All the money that you make, if you're less than this level, you don't pay tax on Social Security. Well, it costs, because we didn't receive that tax dollars, $20 to $30 million a year. So, and that's ongoing. That keeps going forever. So we got to budget that forever. So next year, another $20 and $30 million, another $20, $30 million. Now we got it up where you're making $75,000 a year with your both couples, then you don't pay taxes on your Social Security. But there is even a problem with that, is what if your husband passes away? Then it's half. So we change it so if there's just one, then it's at least 60% because we know that's a huge clip. So we're taking all these very complicated situations and trying to move forward, but we're getting to the point where we're almost there where we can just get it all together.
So just to follow up on that, maybe somebody jump in real quick, and I think we'll make this the last one, right? Okay. You talked earlier, Joseph, about how you thought, hey, we're looking at maybe dropping more taxes, income taxes, those. Do we just concentrate on one? We want it all. You talked about getting a base hit, right? This county, I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm just speaking maybe for me in this question, with the older population, would like to have an opportunity to have a little bit more money coming in and working without having to pay tax. So how do we take it? I didn't quite understand how you take it 20, 30 million, and then you want to cut taxes, but we want to cut taxes on the Social Security. So I'm not quite sure how that meshes together with what my question is. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? You're trying to cut taxes somewhere, but you're saying you can't cut taxes on Social Security because it's going to take $2 million, but we still want to cut taxes.
I'll just stress it.
So how do we cut taxes if we can't?
Cut taxes two ways. Your income that you make, let's say from your investments or your job, that got reduced. There's another bucket that we're reducing. So we didn't reduce this bucket, we reduced this bucket. So that's what it is between the Social Security and the regular income tax bucket.
Sure.
I also have another bill that we didn't get through, was reducing $100 million off of property taxes. That's because Utah County and Washington County were really hurt by this growth that we've seen in the last few years. It's hard to pass because the rest of the counties didn't see that problem. So we're hard to get those representatives to support this type of bill. But your income tax question, we put all of our eggs in this bucket, 170 million, because everybody has an income tax, everybody. So it reduced that bucket. We wanted to lower this additional one, which just deals with older folks that are drawing on Social Security. We've been doing it for 4 years. This year we were not able to. Hopefully, again, we will do that in addition to other tax reductions.
So it is on the to-do list.
Oh, absolutely. You'll see May 5th when we start getting bills done, that Social Security bill will come out again.
Anybody want to add to that? And then we'll end it up with Joseph.
So just real quick, when you look at Social Security income tax, the biggest portion of that's actually on the federal side. So there's only so much we can do, right, on the state side. So we'll keep focusing on the state side, but there's also, if you want to put yourself into productivity, is write your congressmen, write your senators, and write AARP and all these different organizations that you might subscribe to, and let them know the concern. I've been writing them for 30 years. This has been part of my mantra forever because that tax has never had a cost of living adjustment on it. The 32,000 threshold, the 44,000 threshold, as far as the 50 or the 85% Social Security tax, has never had a cost of living adjustment. That's all I've been asking for, is just for crying out loud, just do it at the cost of living adjustment. If nothing, do that. But when it comes to tax reduction, like for example, last year we passed a bill, and part of the bill was to get rid of tax on food, right? It was a sales tax on food. I personally disagree with that from a policy perspective because I don't want tax on food. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to see that gone. I would have rather gone the route to where it's benefiting just Utahns because a lot of our sales tax on food is coming from visitors, right? So let the visitors keep contributing. Let's do what we can to focus more on tax reduction for Utahns first. Then we'll focus on the taxes that others outside of Utah help contribute to our economy, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my priority is let's focus on Utahns first. Then we'll focus on taxes that affect people who come to visit. We can have that conversation later. But yeah, there's always going to be a give and take on tax policy. I'd like to see some tax reductions in a lot of areas, but we got 104 of us that have to agree on that, unless the governor. So.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but please catch them individually if you have more questions. We really appreciate the Sunshine Caucus. We've had a long time relationship.
I think there's a problem with the agenda. The luncheon, I don't think it's May 4th, that's a Saturday.
Maybe you have an old one. Sorry, mine's so April. But anyways,
No, for next month.
oh, for next month. Okay, we'll check on that. Thank you. Yes. Anyways, we really appreciate you guys, your relationship that you've had with Republican women and coming every year and kind of debriefing us on the session. So thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. As Jennifer was saying, our luncheon for May will be at Beckett Abbey Inn, and we're going to have some local school board candidates for that next one, so you'll want to check that out. So thank you so much. We will adjourn the meeting and have a great day. Thank you.
All right. Yes, likewise. I'll fit my name back. You know, sometimes you have to do wrong to get it right.
Yeah, it's over here.
I love these wheels.
You're the best one she's ever had. John agrees, by the way. Thank you. Really appreciate
I guess April might be a resource. Here are my instructions. Where's the flag?
That's not fair.
I guess what happened right here.